It is time, my dudes. It is time to begin the build. So let me get the CPU in, and then I'll put on the cooler, and then we'll throw the GPU in the GPU slot, and hopefully I can get you some pictures of the system booting up for the first time, first light. But for the moment, we'll just put the CPU in, and you can see I've already got the little lever up, so that guy is all set. I'm going to try and do all this one-handed, which is going to make me really clumsy. Also, the light in here is not great. I apologize. Guy dropped right in there, no problem. All right. Next I'll put the cooler on, and then I will get the GPU in, and I'll bring you back when there's something more to see. So there's the cooler installed. I'm just using the stock Wraith Spire cooler because everyone says it's pretty darn good by itself. And there's the DRAM. These are G.Skill Flare X, DDR4 3200 cast latency 14. I'll put the GPU in next, and then I'll have to start hooking up power cables. Okay, we have GPU. Got a little natural light on that so you can see it a little bit better on camera. I picked these particular components not just because I think they're a really good value for the money and that they're sort of mid to high-end parts, but also because I really love the black and red color theme that runs through the whole thing. In fact, I tried to get black and red RAM, but I couldn't find any that, you know, met my specifications for cast latency and such, and actually had red. So, yeah, time to start plugging in some power cables, and then we'll plug in the HDMI cable that's kind of hanging over there, and we'll see some first light. Won't be long for you, might be several minutes for me. One more thing I want to make a quick note of here. This whole bench test with the motherboard and GPU and such on a static mat, this is, and testing things before you put them in the case, this is an idea that I was told to do by a YouTuber named JZ2cents, and he has a how to build a gaming PC video that is really, really excellent for anyone thinking about building your own PC. It gave me a lot of great advice, so I'm going to link that down in the description. But, you know, this whole idea of like having the motherboard just poking off the box a little bit here, hanging your GPU tabs off the edge of the box here, that's all him. That was his good idea, and as well as doing a bench test with everything on a bench to make sure it all works before you spend an hour putting it all in the case only to find out something was, you know, DOA. So, yep, I'm going to put that link to that JZ2cents video in the description, and I hope it helps anybody else who might be thinking about making a computer, and I just wanted to let you guys know about that resource if you were thinking about doing this, because it made my life a hell of a lot easier watching his video, having some idea what the hell I'm doing. Alright, it's time for the moment of truth. Where's the damn switch? Alright, under the cable, right? This power supply and my case are meant to be mounted in such a way that this intake fan points downwards towards the floor. That's why they would put the switch underneath this cable. Now, this shouldn't boot up yet. Instead, what should happen is we should just see some LEDs come on. So, let's see what happens here. Well, I'm not seeing LEDs, but I see something down in there that says Easy Debug LED. I guess I'm going to have to look at the motherboard manual and see what I should be seeing at this point. Okay, so evidently the Easy Debug LEDs, which are these little guys right here, these four, they're not supposed to come on until you actually post the system. So I've plugged in the HDMI cable, it's going over there to my monitor, and I've changed the input on my monitor so that the input for the monitor is the HDMI port in the back, which is what this cable is connected to. And because I'm doing a bench test, and because this motherboard doesn't have a specialized button to actually start it, I'm actually going to have to use a little piece of metal to short out the two power-on connectors on the front panel jumper right here, which are these two ones next to the hole. Pin number 10 is missing on this, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 6 and 8 are the ones that you actually short to start this shit up, so let's see if I can get you a picture of this while I do it. And I heard something from the power supply. Oh, wow, okay. So we got one Easy Debug LED on. And looking at my monitor. Now, this is another thing that JZ2Cents told me, which is the very first time that a Ryzen-based system starts up, it takes a worryingly long time. Oh, okay, it looks like I got the connections wrong for the GPU. All right, hey, sure. All right, I will check out the GPU manual and see what I did wrong, and we'll be back. So, this being a 1080, I figured I was going to need to use the 4-pin connector because it was going to need all the power it could get, and I wouldn't need to use, I wouldn't need to strip off this 4th pin and only use the 3-pin connector. But since it, since it told me that you got the GPU hooked up wrong, I'm going to go ahead and switch that. My GPU did not come with an actual printed manual, so I'm just going to try this and we'll see what happens. Okay. Looking to see that yellow light turn blue. Easy Debug LEDs, I only see one of them. So last time the fan spun down too. Okay, I think these LEDs are actually moving across and it's testing each of the systems one at a time. I also see this is turned on, so that's good. Now again, this is something that JZ2Cents said in his video, which is you probably are going to have to wait a worryingly long time the first time you boot up one of these systems, because this whole system is going to go through its paces, it's going to check things out, it's going to do that 2 or 3 different times, and reboot itself multiple times before you see the first light coming out of there. So, I don't know, I'll keep you guys here for a little while longer, but I don't want you sitting here for too long doing nothing, so I may either cut this in editing, or I may just stop and start again when things are actually, working. I assume it is doing something with the graphics card right now. Though the fans aren't spinning, but the graphics card is definitely on. So that seems to be a good thing. Alright, I'm going to shut this down. I think you guys have sat here long enough, and I will bring it back up if I see anything come up on my monitor. Alright, so I let this thing go for about 7 or 8 minutes, and the little debug LEDs down here, the VGA one was just stuck on solid, and I was never seeing anything on the screen over there, even though I had it tuned to the HDMI cable coming out of here. And this guy was on, but the fans weren't spinning, so I went looking through all the documentation, which is all this crap right here. MSI needs to step up their documentation game. So they give you this cutesy little cartoon dragon who tells you about how to install it, and believe it or not, this is actually fantastic. It's very, very concise. It tells you exactly what you need to know, with one exception. Right there, that top panel, it says, some graphics cards don't require a PCIe 6 or 8 pin power cable. There is no need to plug in the power cable in this case. So when you're looking at your video card and you're asking yourself, do I need to plug in one cable? Do I need to plug in both cables? Do I need to plug in no cables? This guide, as wonderful as it is absolute trash and will not help you. Then there's this. This is... I really want to find the guy who made this and kick him in the nuts, because unlike that, which at least had marginally useful information, this thing... I'm going to try and I'll do this all one-handed, which is going to end in hilarious failure, So I was reviewing the footage that I had taken and noticed that my cell phone camera had turned off right as I was trying to explain to you why this documentation from MSI that goes with the video card is absolutely useless. So basically, this is like 97 different languages worth of instructions. And if you're looking at this trying to figure out how many power plugs to plug into your video card, this is not going to tell you either. The only clue, the little hint you might get from this, maybe... I'm going to try and open this up, and this stupid thing doesn't like to open up. They've folded this in such a way that it wants to close on you when you try to open it up, but I'm going to try and open this up and show you what I want to show you. Alright, so... Here is the opening, and you can see what a stupid wall of text this is. If you're really lucky, when you're looking over these pictures, you'll see this picture, and you'll see that it's showing two plugs, one being plugged into the 8-pin connector and one being plugged into the 6-pin connector. And so that was where I got the idea that I did indeed need to plug in, you know, both cables on the video card. MSI needs to step up their documentation game, basically, because all the documentation that they gave me was either useless or next to useless. So if a 1080 needs to have both of the cables plugged in, then there should be, you know, one sentence, maybe just a sentence fragment saying, you know, plug in both cables, you dumbass. Like, I'm good at following directions if I'm given them, but if I'm not given directions, I can't follow them because I'm not psychic and I can't read minds. And when you're building your own computer, I guess you're just supposed to be smart enough to be able to read minds, because the manufacturer is not going to give you directions about how to do simple things. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty pissed off about this, if it's not obvious. I guess I could have rewatched Jay-Z's whole 30-minute video to learn that I needed to plug in both power cables there, but to me, that's just a major documentation failure. MSI just should have said something about, oh, you know, if this particular 1080, you know, and I went on the internet and I took this exact number of this card, and I searched terms like needs both power connections, or that exact model number, both power cables, or VGA1, VGA2, you know, which is on the power supply there. And, you know, nothing useful at all came up in any of the Google searches. So, yeah, I'm just a little bit pissed off about this. MSI, you know, you just need to kick yourselves in the nuts about your stupidity and your lack of documentation. If I'm supposed to plug in both power cables, there should be one fucking sentence in all this bullshit, in all this crap. You know, there should be one sentence in all this fucking paper that you give me saying plug in both power cables, but there isn't. I read through all of it. It took me 20 minutes to read through all that shit, and then I just had to guess about which power cables to plug into this thing. So that's the rant. But as pissed off as I am at MSI, I want to heap some praise upon EVGA, because EVGA, the guys who made this power supply, let me show you how many cables this came with. So look at this fucking handful of cables here. Like, when you're building your PC at like, 5:45 p.m. on a Sunday evening, you are not going to have to make an emergency run down to South Denver to Micro Center to get cables, because you're going to have every damn cable that you need right here. So very well done, EVGA. This is a fantastic power supply, and just as another little pro touch, they even give you some of these Velcro cable ties so that you can cable manage with something other than fucking zip ties or twist ties. So I love everything about this power supply, and I would totally recommend this guy. So it sure was nice of my jackass cell phone to just magically turn itself off right when we're getting to the good part here. So having plugged in everything, and the GPU seems to be fine now. Fan's still not spinning, but it's probably not very hot yet. Looks like our easy debug light down there, focus you fuck, is on boot. So I'm going to call that a success. And the screen is looking like this. So I think it's time for me to go into the BIOS and start doing my thing on the BIOS. So we'll call that a successful build. No thanks to MSI's lack of documentation. I will bring you guys back in when maybe I have things in the case and I'm installing Windows. Thanks for coming along on this adventure with me. It's been fun. So when I tried to turn it off by shorting the jumper, it instead rebooted and brought me to this much nicer BIOS screen. So I thought I would just give you guys a quick shot of the BIOS screen just so you can see what it looks like when you do successfully boot up your CPU and motherboard for the first time. Okay. As soon as you get the thing booting up, before you even put it in the case, you go ahead and do a BIOS update to the most recent BIOS. So I was already on version whatever .4, and this is going to be updating to version whatever .6. So not a huge upgrade. I looked on the manufacturer's website, it's not that interesting, but I figure whatever. I don't think this is going to hurt anything, and might as well have the latest BIOS. You can see that I've got a USB stick plugged in right here. That's also the stick that has the Windows 10 install on it. While I was building all the hardware over here on my working computer, I was downloading the Windows 10 installer onto that USB stick. So when I have it all cased and when I'm all ready to go, I'll be able to actually install Windows off that USB stick and then just type in my registration key, and then should have a fully working system at that point. Of course, there's quite a ways to go. This was just the bench test. Now I have to actually get all this shit into a case, add my SSD and my regular mechanical drive for video editing, and generally make everything work. But hey, it's progress. This is farther than I thought I would get on the first day anyway, particularly considering how late it is and how late I started. So a little hiccup with the GPU there, not knowing which power cables to plug in, and of course documentation not saying a damn thing about how to do it. But no biggie. I think another piece of feedback I would have for MSI in terms of this Gaming 470 motherboard, Gaming Plus, is these LEDs down here are much too bright. You can't actually see what's written on the PCB silk screen because these are so bright. And even when I take my glasses off to eliminate some of the glare, that's still a really hard, gritty, laser-like glare coming off that LED. So you guys need to tone that shit down. So yeah, anyway. Looks like the GPU fans still aren't spinning. Don't need to. Another thing I tweaked in the BIOS while I'm talking here is I turned on XAMP profile number 2, which is for 3200 megahertz DDR5 or DDR4, whatever it is, 3200 megahertz RAM, which is the kind of RAM that I actually have in this thing. You know, fancy-pantsy RAM, but I had to actually go into the BIOS and actually turn that on, because by default it assumes your RAM is 2400 megahertz. So if you have, or 2600 megahertz, so if you have fast RAM, you have to go tell the BIOS, hey dude, can you please actually, you know, use the RAM that I paid so much money for. The CPU, on the other hand, it absolutely detected the CPU right away, 3.7 gigahertz right out of the box, as promised. So everything is great with the CPU, just had to tell it to actually use the fancier RAM that I paid $250 for. So I will let you know when I've got everything in the case, and looks like we're almost done with the BIOS update here, and we'll see what happens. And we'll see if it's stable. We'll see if the RAM is worth it and if the RAM is stable at those higher speeds that I set them to. So when it rebooted after the BIOS update, I had left my USB stick with my Windows install media in the slot here, and unfortunately, I was too slow hitting the delete key, so I didn't get back into the BIOS to check if the BIOS upgrade had worked. Instead, it actually booted off that USB key, and now we've got the Windows 10 install screen saying, hey, would you like to install Windows? And of course the answer is, well, no, not yet. I've got other shit I have to do, like putting everything in a case, but it's good to know that my Windows install media USB stick is actually working right.